Hello and welcome to Sustainapod, the podcast produced by young people for young people about the world of sustainability. We talk with leading changemakers about what it takes to build a more sustainable present and future, sharing the stories, tips, insights for you to take action. My name is Chinny, and for those of you who have tuned in from before, you might recognize me from the Green Career series. It's really nice to be back again, and today I'm joined by my lovely co-hosts, Ava and Tim. Throughout our podcast, we have featured professionals and young changemakers working across various sectors, industries, and subjects within sustainability. While many are very specialized in the work that they do, there's also immense value in working across industries, as the world needs collective action if we are to decarbonize and prevent anything above a 1.5-degree warming in line with the Paris Agreement. Today, we have an incredible guest, Lidia Aviles, joining us today to talk more about the value of pursuing multiple ventures and becoming a thought leader in the sustainability space. Aviles is a sustainability and innovation expert, mentor, writer, educator, and entrepreneur from El Salvador and based in Belgium. She has been an EU Climate Pact ambassador since 2021 with experience working across countries on international affairs, business law, deep tech, metaverse, and more. Lidia, thank you so much for joining us on Sustainapod. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much, Chinny. Very honored to be here. I have a lot of respect for academia in general, and I also have a background as a teacher. So it feels good to be back in the realm a little bit and to be useful into the next generation.
You've had such a diverse and amazing career journey. Could you tell us briefly about yourself and your journey so far?
So I can say that the basics of all of that, it's just being curious by nature. And I think we all share that in a way of form. Luckily enough, I happen to experience different sectors and different countries as well. I was born in El Salvador. I grew up in between Nicaragua, Massachusetts, and Florida. Now I'm Belgian, living here for the last 15 years. And as a European in Brussels, sustainability was some of the things that I was touching without knowing. Every time I was curious about something, I will just look courses online and study them because I wanted to know more. I was just learning things that I liked and that I was curious or passionate about. And then eventually it happened to be the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which now we have them here. So it's amazing. Now I'm a European Climate Pact ambassador, and I also founded my company this year to help cross sectors to connect each other, because there are so many silos, and which means that sectors are working in their own corner, and sometimes they kind of forget to share what's going on in between. The service that we are providing to other sectors and industries is very lag behind. So that's a little bit of a niche.
Sounds like you've done so much fantastic things.
Can you tell us more about your company, what challenges you are hoping to address, and what are some key learnings during your entrepreneurship journey?
So actually, AELSTONE was born to serve the needs that I encounter myself in different sectors as an expert. I worked in the aviation sector globally, and I saw like the constant problem every time that sectors were just working on their own space. How can we actually move into a net zero if we're working in our own space without sharing? When we refer to the sustainable development goals, we see them as a whole and not separate. So it's very difficult to tackle or to think that we are in the same path when we don't even know what's happening in the other side. So that was kind of like the envision that I had for AELSTONE. I saw the opportunity, and I said, like, I was already doing it for different sectors, so why not to, open a company behind it? Yeah.
So on a slightly different topic, I heard that you've got an honorary doctorate for discovering the earthquake pattern and the rebound. So could you share a little bit more about this?
Yes. So actually, in 2010, I was in the last year of my international relations degree. And to be honest, I had a lot of time in my hands at the time. The big earthquake in Chile hit, and it was very devastating for the region. I was fascinated by the force it had, and I was like, it's crazy. And then I noticed there was an earthquake also happening in Japan, a few days after, and then it was back in Chile again, and then it was back in the Asia countries. So I continue and I check online. Luckily, we can check everything, and then you can find research papers published. I learned through the process because I didn't know anything about it. I was always fascinated about physics in general, so I kind of like had a basic, knowledge to understand most of the papers. And then I noticed there was actually a rebound frequency happening in the basin. With my own notes, without knowing how to do that, I just put it together a paper, and then I contacted a few universities, and most of them they didn't care. But there was a university who said, we would like to propose to do the research behind that, and we're going to do it. And then I got an email saying like, we granted you an honorary doctorate. And that was like, okay, cool. So actually, I didn't even finish my bachelor when that happened, but it was very random. And to be honest, I didn't develop fully myself. It was more like I discovered it, and then I gave it back to the professionals who can handle it.
Yeah, I think that's very important because earthquakes are so disruptive and it's also disruptive to sustainable development. So it's really important that we know how to predict it and to take the according measures to prepare and combat it.
Exactly. Yeah. At the time, I was not in my head how that can help. But then I realized if we at least we know that there was an earthquake hit, and then the next one is going to be cross the ocean or cross whatever the frequency is traveling to. I thought like that's really important because now that we know more about the sustainability in general, this is one of the major catastrophic things when it comes to nature disasters and social life in general. So it's not just one thing.
I think there are a few things that I found really interesting. Firstly, what you said about having more accessibility to kind of the internet is something that a lot of youth now are kind of taking advantage of. And it's really cool to hear that you kind of use that as kind of a stepping stone for your own research paper. And another thing is that I'm also a physics student, so I'm also very interested in physics. And it's really cool how there's so many aspects of physics that tie in with our natural world. And it's like such a fundamental topic. It's really good to hear that was something that you were interested in, tying in geophysics in a way to uncover the roots of sustainability. So moving on to another topic, which might drastically be very different to what we were previously discussing, is we understand that you also have a background in kind of business ethics and law. What do you think is the importance or the role of business ethics and law in relation to sustainability?
Yeah, thank you, Chinny. I think it's one of those stones where you build everything. And I think it also happens to be trust. How can you trust a person that is unethical? And then how can you trust a business that is unethical? The reason the law exists in a way of saying is because people don't do the right thing on their own behalf. So it's something that it needs to be structured. Let's imagine red lights at a crossroad. We have them there to prevent accidents, right? We don't have them there just for fun. So when people follow the guidelines, everything is cool. But then, for example, in the night, there is no traffic or something. And you see sometimes people passing with precaution. You realize that actually people do behave correctly, but the lights are there just because sometimes you're not really thinking proactively into that direction of being ethical. So now when we talk about entrepreneurship and companies in general, there is this idea of like, let's get very close to the line of illegal things, but it's still in the legal part. It's already unethical somehow because you're actually trying to get the advantage without the responsibility. So in my opinion, I think we should always be after being better. So if I can do something legal, let's try to make it also ethical. So if the companies start doing that and protecting the people around them, protecting themselves, protecting everything, then it creates a domino effect, kind of like a synergetic thing that eventually it will touch everybody and everybody will start behaving like that. So there are cities, places that you can go and you lose like a ring with a diamond. And there are cities in the world that you can actually go to the lost office and you will find them there, which is amazing. But most of the places in the world, if you lost it once, you will never see it again. So this happens also in the entrepreneurship. It's like sometimes people are take advantage of everything and everybody instead of serving them. And this is the difference, in my opinion. I was a professor of business law and business ethics for a while, 2 years actually. I enjoyed it a lot because the difference in between the legal aspect and the ethical aspect is huge. And we feel that maybe it's the same, but it actually is very big because most of the people or the companies are straight in the line of something legal and that's it. but the ethical part they neglect because they think it's a waste of time or waste of money or waste of resources, when in fact it's a good movement. The kinetics behind that is like, if I do that, whatever work that you do, you are compensated. This is like kind of like the nature of law. When you respect nature, it becomes your friend. And we sometimes feel like it's very far away, like we see nature like it's an object and instead of being an entity somehow, and because of that we get into the situations of unethical behavior with nature.
So I think I agree with you. It's very important to get that balance between the legal and ethical aspects and using law as a tool to achieve those ethical means of behavior, like socially or environmentally. So for our next question, you worked in the technological and sustainability intersection with policy at the EU Commission. Could you share a little bit about what you did there? I think this is a very broad question, and we could probably do a whole podcast on this, but just like briefly tell us about some things you found interesting.
Yes. So actually, I participated as a support in different things, and one of the things I still do is I'm an expert providing support basically to the innovation and technology ecosystems in Europe, and in different ways. I sometimes mentor, I sometimes call into public opinion, like parliamentary sessions where the parliamentarians are asking different experts. So given this opportunity for, in this case, like when you think about legislation, to ask and genuinely they are looking for answers. Let's imagine how to solve some problems in AI or why we need it and why it's important for the region. It's something that kind of like helped to continue in developments of technologies. I think the most important part is to know that whenever these sessions happen, either parliament or a commissioner, there is really an intention to understand the technologies and also how to leverage them for the good of the people. So it's something that I'm proud to be part of it. And sometimes I provide support in different things, like very technical stuff, or help them with entrepreneurship, in the startups community and so on.
Wow. So I think developing technology is just not for the sake of it, but to use it to achieve sustainability and how it can achieve some social benefits. So I think that links nicely with the next question, which Chinny is going to ask about technology.
I think there's something interesting that you mentioned before was kind of exploring the intersection between like sustainability and AI. As I think you used AI as an example. I think kind of with the rise of like ChatGPT and all of these like different expansions of AI, it's like way more important now that I think governments and different parliaments kind of adopt this method as a way to, solve really critical issues that not only lie in sustainability, but I think also social impact. I think that's also something that could be really important. So kind of following on with the technological side of things, having worked in the kind of aviation or energy industry, what do you think are kind of key obstacles facing decarbonization of these industries? Like, I think Belinda mentioned before that you specifically worked to create awareness of the need of energy storage. So how do you think, what are some key kind of obstacles are in the way right now?
The biggest obstacle in everything that is related to sustainability and net zero is the businesses are, we have this phrase, like a business as usual. Like we don't want to change things. We want them to continue being the way they are because, well, one is because there is a big issue happening and to changing everything, and second, we just are very complacent. We don't want to go through the changes and all of that, which is, we understand, right? It's something that we all face at some point. So those are the biggest challenges. Business as usual, it's a problem because nobody wants to make the shift, or at least it's more difficult for people to actually have the mentality to go through that, the breakthrough behind that. But these are challenges that also are being, keen into. There are a lot of support behind that. So we see, for example, like the European Commission as well as the United States and some other countries have develop incentive programs for the sectors to change. So it's something that somehow we can say them like, you need to go into that direction, but you also are getting some support and help from us, so it's something that it's everyone doing, and not just like your own initiative, your own budget. So even if it looks like it has to come from you or the company itself. But then one of the things behind that as well is, as an example with energy in general, is like the new technologies are ready to adapt to the old systems, so you don't really need to change the whole grid or any of that. When you can simply there is adaptability in between, like you can kind of like plug in and plug out the thing. So when we speak specifically about storage, you can simply plug in, let's say, energy storage behind that, and you can see a little bit more of that. For example, like energy thermal storage, it's very adaptable in that sense, so you just simply put it in and put it out. You can also hear a lot about hydrogen, although hydrogen is not ready yet in full as we expect it to be. But thermal energy storage is already functioning, and business cases are already happening at today's. So that aviation sector in general, like aviation, when you think about let's make aviation sustainable, it sounds like easy thing, but like there is a fleet of airplanes that we have, and what are we going to do with that if we change them all? So that's one thing. And second thing is like, if there is a malfunction in one of those airplanes, it's a little bit more difficult, and that's why it's highly regulated. So whenever there is a decision making happening behind aviation, it takes years to actually be ready, because we need to be sure that there is the safety behind with passengers and so on. It's not so easy. Like if a car there is a car malfunction, it will stop and that's it. You still can get out of the car and whatever. But an airplane, if there is a malfunction, is really an issue. So that's why it has taken a little bit. It's an industry that takes a little bit longer to for the adaptability of sustainability, and it's also an industry that creates a little bit more concern behind, like, are we ready yet or not? And that's why we have now SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel, that it's a good component for the transition itself. So, and there is also the difference in between, like long hauls and short hauls, so which is like short trips and long trips. So the idea behind in the roadmap for sustainability, they are too different for the two of them because there are two different options. So for the short trips, electric might be the solution directly, but for the long ones it might not be, because we are talking about high altitude. So just to give a like an overview on that.
Yeah, I think for sure. I think like business as usual is something I've heard a lot recently in regards to sustainability. And I definitely agree that it's dangerous and so for so many reasons, because the only way that we can kind of mitigate this climate challenge is that we need to make the change necessary and we need to adapt. It's no longer about prevention. I think now a lot of people are trying to just mitigate the obstacles because they are already here. Like, I think there should be a bigger emphasis on that. And also, I think when you mentioned the riskiness of implementing decarbonization in the aviation industry, for sure, I think that's something I haven't considered in too much depth before. But because I've been thinking about the factors like contrail formation and how like Google, for example, is using AI to kind of reduce that. It's very risky to be implementing such large scale reductions or decarbonization strategies for such like $1 billion industry, and also an industry which essentially controls so much of our global economy, our trade, and like the safety of the passengers is also a huge aspect. So I think there's so many components which you need to factor in when kind of deciding, and I think this is a really huge question for that reason. But I think you summarized it very well, and I think definitely agree with everything you said. For the next question, I think Tim will be asking that one. So on to you, Tim.
All right. Thank you. Now, what advice would you give and you're a successful businesswoman and a sustainable sustainability activist, sustainable advocate, and I would just want to ask you that what advice would you give to high school and university students, listeners of Sustainpod, about pursuing a meaningful career in sustainability, or better, or taking action for sustainability?
I honestly, in a full basic opinion, I will tell you to take it serious and find joy. Find the joy and the happiness behind that, behind learning, pursuing something. it's a matter of attitude, and it's a discipline. It's like when you start exercising or you start a sport. At the beginning it's, rough, your body hurts after the few trainings and so on, but after that you enjoy it, and your body kind of like has the rewards of that. And it's similar to the learning part. Like whatever you choose to learn, it will be helpful for sustainability. That I can tell you very, very, very with a lot of certainty. So if you find joy behind learning, you will have that kind of like activist, like active serotonin in your brain that will just basically make you happy. So it's like your body will influence that from the intestine, and it will go up to your brain, and you will have that eureka moment and that breakthrough feeling that you only have by doing so. So get to that point where you take serious studying, take serious, like what kind of like showering yourself with knowledge and information, and go through the to the roots of the problems, if I can say that. So for example, like when we think about, I don't know, like if you think about cancer, let's say you want to become a doctor somehow, and go to the root of the problem. What's the really root of the problem, not the symptoms? And this is in the medicine part, but let's imagine you're let's in math or physics, right? You have this idea like where everything comes from. So it's the same thing. It's like the symptoms or the reactions of something, it comes from somewhere. So you see the waves, but the waves didn't initiate in the waves, right? It's like something that that it comes is as a reaction of something. So those things are very important to take serious, and don't be complacent. Like if you learn something and then it's like you reach the kind of like the top, or as much as you could, continue into something else while something else develop. And then if you reach that level of like, oh, there's no more to do here, then shift and learn something else, but don't stop learning. That's my I think my advice to all the learners. And you can concentrate in your career, you finish that one, and then if you're interested in something else, you can finish something else too. So you got a bachelor in something that is related, let's imagine, to business, and then or physics, and then the master you can do it in I don't know, like quantum mechanics or whatever, if you are interested in that. But do have the discipline to finish everything you start to. It's important.
Thank you, Lydia.
Thanks.
Wow, that sounds very interesting. So yeah, as I mentioned before, I also want to work in sustainability related fields in the future. So I'll definitely note down your advices. But for your work and other works in general, there are often this multilateralist approach. So I would like to ask, what is this approach and why is it so important? And how can one keep this approach in a career?
Yeah, I think it relates more to the fact of different, again, kind of like being the bridge of different cultures and different states, or like sometimes you are in a position where you are the only one who understands two different stakeholders. It could be a state, it could be companies, it could be like in general. So when you have this cross cultural, cross sector approach, is because sometimes you have experienced both. And this is something that I think I invite young students to actually do. Like if you're interested in physics and you know so much about it, sometimes it's good if you find a conference or a podcast in something else, like something like real estate, for example, or finance. So combining those experiences and knowledge, it helps you eventually to get into that direction where you can actually understand what's happening here and there. But the idea behind that is how you can be useful and how to help the sectors and how to help the people. So how learning creates a service mode and you understand them. So that's the approach behind that. And that in how to do it is to actually be interested in the other party's interests as well, or at least try to like open-minded into the information, like why are the economics so bad, for example, and go to the fact of like understanding them. So like this, we don't have the crazy approach of like, you have some, we call, the radical, in the way of saying like, there's people that are advocating for sustainability and they go very, like, we have to cut this and we have to do that. It's amazing to have that passion, but it's important to understand the mechanics behind it and the economics behind it. We need a transition to happen, so like these people don't fall into unemployment, like these people continue eating. And also we have like the transition for adaptability. We cannot just stop today and start something tomorrow. There is a transition. The transition could be 3 months, the transition can be 1 week, but the transition part, it's important to understand that it's part of the process. So when you understand the economics behind, when you understand the investment part behind, when you understand social aspects behind, you understand that, there is more to the eye than just my passion. And being interested in someone's passion, that helps you to understand them and to help them through the transition.
So as you said, it's very difficult to balance those goals for different stakeholders in the organizations, and there are so many factors that need to take into account for sustainable development, like the social and the environmental, the economic. So I think this is exactly why we need more people like you to come out and discuss how can we help these different sectors and people.
Thank you, Eva. Yeah, I think we are in the right spot to for people. I think we are waking up, you are participating, and when you think about the new generation, it already comes with that mindset, which is perfect.
Yeah, definitely. And I think something that you mentioned that was like recurring throughout was kind of the intersection of different fields within sustainability. Now everything is in some way, one way or another, related to sustainability. So I think it's very important that you voice that out, because I think we all here at Sustainapod definitely agree with utilizing different fields and mechanizing them towards, sustainable development. And I think that's something we should definitely focus on now and in the future. So as kind of the last question, now there's a lot of sustainability focused on online content nowadays, such as like our content at Sustainapod and so many other youth-led initiatives and also nonprofits. What would you say is your approach to creating accessible and engaging thought leadership?
I think the key factor is to serve. So it's like we have covered different topics, and sometimes we think like, oh, we already know that. But then when we talk with people, different things, or let's say, imagine it's the same topic, we sometimes we learn that we don't know everything, right? And this is the approach of serving, like in this case, like the podcast, and the people that are listening to it, they are expecting something from it. They expect probably to learn something. It's not an entertaining only, but when you combine, in this case, entertaining plus learning, is the cool thing, right? It's like when we have a TV show that they are combining the two things, and you're like, oh, this is cool because it's creating like dopamine somewhere, and which is probably not the healthiest one, but it's also creating serotonin, and then you're like, oh, this is nice. So top leadership, I think it's in this sense, when you are serving, like you could be the best, the most expert in something, but if you're not really serving a community in general, or if you're just inhaling oxygen, what's your purpose? You have to have a purpose behind, like what is this. In my case, I feel like serving is the biggest purpose, because when you serve, automatically reward comes on its own. It's like we have like you have fruits, you have trees and all of that, and when you think about the best things in nature, they are serving us, and that's why we love them. We don't think about oxygen every day, but it's what we need every day. Are we grateful enough with oxygen? I'm not sure, but is that what we are trying, at least, right? It's like the sun is coming up every day, and we are like, we just take it for granted. So like serving is beyond your expectations of receiving something back, but for sure it will.
Wow, that sounds very interesting, and it's really fantastic what you do. And as you mentioned, like the spirit of serving. So I think with that, we'll come to the end of our episode. Thank you so much to Lydia for sharing all your insights with us today. We've learned so much about your work and hope that the listeners have too. And thank you to the Sustainapod listeners for tuning in this week. We'd love to hear about your thoughts regarding this episode. So DM us on Instagram at sustainapod_GIH or email us at sustainapod@gmail.com. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lydia, and have a nice day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you.